I'm out of staples. Hey, where are the staples? Always the problem. When you're doing a project, you run out of something right when you need it. So, let's pull the chair around here. Trying to fix this screen that goes over that, where all the birds always build a nest, and then the blue jays come out of this tree, and then they throw all their eggs on the ground, and those poor birds have to keep going through it over and over. The mourning doves, I feel sorry for them. Hey, I want to talk today about discipline growing up as a kid. Discipline, how it shapes who you are and your life. I did one about stealing a bicycle from my friend and how my dad taught me a lesson to never steal again, and I never did. I want to talk today about this. This is a tape measure. This tape measure is very fancy now, but back when I was a kid, it wasn't that fancy. And I want to tell you a little bit about my dad. I would take all his tools when I was a kid, and I'd go work on my bicycle in the front yard. And in Florida, we had a lot of rain, so the grass would get wet and all. And I would take these tools and I'd get the adjustment on my bike, and I'd drive down the street and come back and adjust it again, and I'd leave the tools in the grass. Now, my dad mowed the lawn. He would sometimes hit one of those damn tools that he couldn't find in his toolbox. And man, he would get so mad at me. He'd say, "Put these things back." And it took me a long time, and I'm that way now. I can be as messy as hell, but the project isn't done until I clean everything else up and put it back where it was. And it's a good lesson to learn. It's a good lesson to teach a kid, right? You spend more time looking for things than you do actually doing the job. But what happened to me and how this shaped my life was I would leave those tools in the yard all the time, and I was really disrespectful of my dad's tools. And he would tell me sometimes, he said, "Listen, if you ever do something wrong, tell me, because if you tell me, your punishment will be a lot less than if I find out on my own." And I heard that so many times. So we're living in Florida, right? St. Pete, Florida. And my dad comes up one day, and him and my mom are going to the commissary. The commissary is a kind of a grocery store on the Air Force Base, MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, and we were living in St. Pete. And so they would have to drive all the way over there. It was a good 45 an hour and then back. It was a 2.5 hour, maybe 3 hour trip for them every time they would go. So my dad comes to me just before they leave, and he holds up one of these. But he holds up, it's like silver back then. It was all chrome and very slim, because this is back a long time ago. I had never seen a tape measure in my life. And he went like this. He said, and I went like that. He said, "This is my tape measure, okay? Okay? I just bought this. You're not to touch it. In fact, I'm going to put it not in my tools, but in the top drawer of my nightstand by the bed. Don't you ever go in there. Don't you ever touch this. Okay?" All right. So they leave. I'm in my room. And my room is a mess. I had so many projects going on. I was trying to send a lizard into space with a 2-stage rocket. I would build things all the time. My room was like a garbage pit, but it was the pit of a creative mind, right? And so I'm sitting in that room, and I'm thinking of all the things that I could use a tape measure for at that very minute. Plus, it was magic. How did that thing work? I was always curious about, how do things work? So yeah, I went in, and I knew right where it was. I went in the top drawer, and there was the tape measure, and I'm going, "This is so awesome." And I flipped that thing. I did this again and again. I kept doing this. How does that work? How the hell does that work? It's magic. What's pulling that in there? I'm thinking mechanical, what would it be? Couldn't figure it out, right? There's always a screw. See this Phillips screwdriver right there? This Phillips screw? Well, that got me in trouble. So I take that tape measure, and I take it into my room, and I said, "I wonder how big my room is." So I put the tape measure, let's see if I can do this while you're watching. Oh my God, I'm gonna break my neck. I put the tape measure at the end of my room, kind of like this, all the way to the wall. And then I put a weight on it, probably a shoe or something like that. And then I pulled the tape measure all the way across the room, and I didn't get to the end, it stuck. hey, there's 6 more inches to the wall. Why is this sticking? I look down, there's no more numbers on the tape measure. I don't know if I can do it with this one because I'd probably ruin it too. But when you get to the end of the tape measure, let's see if I can get to the end without doing the same damn thing I did that day. This one's 16 feet long. You'll notice it's going caution. There's these red words, caution, attention, do not go any further. Because if you do, you go to the edge of where it is. I didn't know that. They didn't print that on there those days. So I pulled it beyond 10 feet to about 10 foot 3 inches, and I looked down, and there's no longer numbers, there's white things, and I can't get it to go back in. And I'm like, holy crap, how do I get this thing to go back in? And I am pulling and pushing, and I'm trying to get this damn thing to go back in. It will not go back in. So I'm thinking, God, I got to get this done before they get home. So how do I fix it? Well, the way I always fix things. There's a screw here, and I'm going to unscrew this, not knowing what was inside that was actually causing the tape measure to go back. I'd learned that in a hard way. So I unscrewed it, and what happens is something to this day surprised me. There were 10 feet of rolled up steel spring inside there that pulls it back. So as you pull it out, it gets tighter and tighter, and it wants to go back to its normal shape. Well, that 10 feet explodes out like spaghetti, and I got 20 feet of metal tape measure in my hand like this. I have no idea. How am I going to put this back? I sat there on the floor and said, this is impossible. I can't do this, especially one person. So I had one saving grace. I said, wait a minute. My dad said to me, if I ever do something like this, to tell him, because the punishment would be much worse. So that's what I'll do. That'll get me out of this, because I'll be honest. I'm going to be honest for the first time and not let him find this out secretly. Okay. So my dad comes home, my mom comes home, they got all the groceries. They used to buy like 6 packs of these big cases of beer. My dad drank a lot of canned beer. They got it all loaded in. The door shuts finally. I have all the deliveries back and forth. They have to go back and forth. And I come out of the bedroom with this 20 feet of twisted metal like this. And I go, Dad, and I didn't get the words out. My dad flipped out, royally flipped out. And I mean, he took that from me and he put me in my room and he whipped my ass. That was back when we had capital punishment. My mom didn't agree with it, but sometimes a belt would come out. This time I got hit, and I think it was with his hand on my ass. The door slammed. You're not allowed to come out of here until I allow you to. Well, my mom and dad had a really bad fight, and I remember this. One of the few times I remember them yelling at each other. And then it got quiet, and for the next few days, they didn't talk to each other. But that night, my mom snuck to me Oreo cookies. Anytime I got in trouble, she would sneak me Oreo cookies. And I used to do things at the dinner table they didn't know about. Like my dad would make these peppers with rice in them. I absolutely hated these, but I couldn't get up out of the dinner table until I finished. So while they weren't looking, I would take a bite and wrap it in a napkin and throw it in the garbage. And I would, until the plate was clean, and then I could go play and do what I wanted. Anyway, my dad taught me something that day. He says, listen, you need to respect other people's property. You do not go into their private places. You do not take their stuff, especially when they tell you. But I secretly always blamed my dad, because I said, listen, if you had never told me it was in your upper drawer in your nightstand and I thought it was in your toolbox out in the garage, I would have never, ever, ever found it. See, because I didn't really go into his room. I did find some Playboy magazines there once, which was pretty cool when they would go away. Yeah. Anyway, have a great Sunday. I got to get back to trying to save the birds. Save the birds.